Hello everyone, my name is Sneha and I'm going to be speaking about the most used agile methodology in today's workforce, Scrum. In this video, we will be discussing the characteristics of Scrum, the roles in a Scrum team, a few of the differences between the waterfall method and the Scrum method, and real-world applications of the Scrum process. So let's get started. What is Scrum? Chances are that you've heard of it because it is widely used in today's workforce. Scrum is an agile method which is a lightweight framework that is designed to manage complex software development projects. It was created to embrace the inevitable changes and ambiguity that occurs when creating a new product. Scrum uses various processes and techniques in short iterations to produce deliverable software to the customer. Scrum requires continuous feedback from the end users, and the customers are always in the loop to ensure that the right requirements are being captured. Its ability to rapidly change and adapt to changes is what gives it an advantage over the traditional waterfall model. So I'm going to let you pause and think for a little bit here. How does Scrum differ from a waterfall process? Okay, so while there are similarities between the two methodologies, the main difference between Scrum and Waterfall is that there is a lot more communication between the different internal sectors of a company when using the Scrum methodology. The Waterfall method is sequential and does all of the 5 stages: planning, designing, performing, testing, and deploying in a linear fashion. So what that does, it assumes that in planning and designing stage, the customer or end users know all of the requirements of the project and exactly how they would like it to function. And typically the developers are not included in these meetings, which really creates a gap in communication between the users and the developers. In most cases, the stakeholders do not know all of the requirements right at the beginning, which is why the Scrum method is more preferred. Scrum method divides its work in sprints of 2 to 4 weeks where all of the 5 stages that I mentioned before are performed. That's usually the case. There are advantages to using the waterfall model as well. Mostly the executives and stakeholders prefer the waterfall model because they can control the requirements and budget in the beginning stages. In Scrum, change is accounted for, so there are risks of feature changes and budget changes in the future. If a company knows exactly what they want their product to be, the traditional waterfall model might prove to be successful. But again, the fact remains, the customer is only engaged and only see the product once the work is finished, which is a really big risk. And I think that's why Scrum right now is still widely favored in today's workforce. So in this slide, we get into the details of the Scrum process. Let's start on the left with the product owner and product backlogs. In Scrum, features are written from the perspective of the end user, that is known as user stories. A user story is a tool used in Scrum to capture a description of a software feature from the end user's perspective. The user story describes the type of user, what they want, and why. It helps create a simplified description of a requirement that will be broken down into features in the product backlog. A product backlog consists of a collection of user stories and is almost similar to a wish list of what the product feature should be. The product owner owns the product backlog and in collaboration with the team develops the user stories and the requirements for the project. The higher priority items will be on the top of the backlog and be issued to complete in the earlier sprints. Once the sprint has started, there will be no changes to the requirement, and that is very important because otherwise the sprints would be chaotic. The team spends about 2 to 4 weeks designing, coding, testing the product before a potentially shippable product is released. There are daily Scrum meetings and updates to ensure that the project is on track to meet the deadline. The customers review the potentially shippable product, and then the process is repeated. Now that we know the high levels of Scrum, let's take a look at the players. Let's start with the Scrum Master. Their responsibility is to make sure the project is progressing smoothly and that every member of the team has the right tools to finish their tasks. They set up meetings, monitor the work being done, and facilitate release planning. They help improve team productivity in any way possible and shield the team from external interference. The Scrum Master also enables close cooperation across all roles and functions during the sprint. The product owner helps make sure the right features make it into the backlog, representing the users and the customer of the product. They define the features of the product, prioritize the product backlog, and are typically responsible for achieving financial goals of the project. Developers are the ones that translate the requirements into code. They build the products. Testers, as in the name, test to make sure the product is functioning in the intended behavior. And the customers and the stakeholders are typically the end users that will be using the software daily, or the management who typically pays for the product. Next, we move on to exploring some of the Scrum tasks. Now, Scrum consists of 3 tasks or ceremonies that is typically organized by the Scrum Master and will include the team and product owner. The purpose of a sprint planning is to discuss and select top priority product backlog items. This is where the sprint backlog is created, tasks are identified, and estimations are made to determine hours of completion. This is done before the sprint starts. Now, the daily Scrum meetings that we have kind of gone through before is also known as stand-up meetings and are typically short and go over everyone's tasks for the day. It's really not used for problem solving, but rather to announce if there are any roadblocks and to report on progress status. The goal is for it to be short enough that the entire team can stand up and complete the meeting. Next is the sprint review, where the whole team reviews what they have accomplished during the sprint. It typically takes the form of a demo of new features or underlying architecture. It's informal and provides brief feedbacks on accomplishment. Similarly, the sprint retrospective is where the team periodically takes a look at the pros and cons of what processes are working and what could be improved. Both the sprint review and sprint retrospective are done after every sprint, and usually the whole team participates. All right, so we're moving on to Scrum tools. One of the tools that I use in my daily work to manage artifacts in the Scrum methodology is Jira. Jira is a widely used tool, and it's very helpful for all the parties to see the progress for each sprint. It also supports the organizations of all requirements where the tickets are listed in order by priority. The tickets can be assigned to each sprint, and it really helps prioritize features. Both the product owner and the Scrum Master would benefit from this tool. Jira also provides statistics about how long a ticket took to complete. It shows progress on many items that are left to complete, and it shows the developers that are working on the current features. Project estimation is very important during a sprint, and Jira's features include the well-known burn-down charts. So burn-down charts are a reason why Scrum has become so popular, because it really shows you the amount of time it takes and the measurement of the amount of work remaining in a given sprint. And that trend should be lowering every day. And by the end of the sprint, there is nothing left in that chart. So it's a great visibility tool to know if the team will make the deadlines on a particular sprint. It also shows you exactly which team member is working on a particular task. I would highly recommend checking out Jira if you are on a hunt for a new tool. It's a great collaboration site for PMs, Scrum Masters, product owners, and of course, developers. So, we have spoken a lot about Scrum, but the real question is, does Scrum work? Is it really working in the real world? Here is a funny Dexter cartoon that examines some of the frustrations while working with Scrum. So the success rate, according to the Scrum Alliance Media, where I received this chart from, Scrum is successful 62% of the time. The survey examined 14 plus industries in 108 different countries, and around 4,500 participants were involved. Larger organizations reported the most challenges that they had was to move away from the waterfall-based model and drive into more of the Scrum Agile practices. Small organizations had a challenge to capture metrics to measure the success of their project delivery. However, the overall consensus was that Scrum is successful more than half of the time, which is still, the odds are still in the favor of Scrum. Who uses Scrum? Here are a few companies that I'm sure all of you have heard of that are known to use Scrum methodology right now, that have used it in the past, and I'm sure some of them will still continue to use it in the future. Which leads us to the next question: what is the future of Scrum? So Scrum has been around longer than a decade and will continue to be used in the next 5 to 10 years. However, with the rapid change in technology field, there might be a new method that overtakes Scrum and Agile in the future, but for now, Scrum is here to stay. Thank you all for viewing my presentation on Scrum. I hope you have a great day and you learned a little something about one of the most popular used Agile methodologies. Take care, everyone.